Good morning, YouTube. We're back again for another lift. It's a leg day session, so as we mentioned in the last video, we did switch up the split just a little bit. So originally I kind of had that back, so pull day, push, chest day, legs. Now we've had chest day yesterday with a bit of shoulders in there, so more of a predominant push. Back is actually feeling really great today. It was slightly sore yesterday, and that's why we switched things up. So I could have done a back day today, but we're going to do legs, and I might just throw in a little bit of back accessory work at the back end of this session as well, just depending on how I feel. When we're at the weekends, we have more time to train, so that's always the benefit of weekend sessions, is that we can do that little bit more if we want. I typically will do AM PM, as you've seen probably in the past too. And if you haven't seen those things, make sure you check in and do it. So we've actually got a bit of a session switch up format in terms of today's leg day session. So what I'm doing right now is rotating some of the exercises in the lifts. So I'm starting with what we finished with in our last leg day, which is some adduction and abduction within the machine. So actually treating this as a primary exercise stimulus rather than it being tacked on at the end when you're a little bit more fatigued. So what we'll then do is we're going to up the weight. The rep range will be slightly lower than what we've been used to, and we're not going to necessarily go to failure, just because we do have a couple of different exercise patterns, some squats in there, leg extensions, our usual suspects. And you'll probably watch these videos and be like, your leg day doesn't really vary as much as some of the other days. And honestly, the reason for that is it's just there's less musculature in a sense. And so in terms of developing length tension relationships and different positions, it's actually not that many things that you have to actually do to expose the muscles to different things. So what we can actually do within a lot of leg day workouts is just change our format of our foot positioning, and then that's going to potentially change some of the length tension relationship that we would see, and therefore would change contribution of those muscle fibers and potentially our hypertrophy adaptations. Now the thing is, I'm saying all that and it's kind of a little bit more theoretical in a sense. There are some methodological studies that are out there that have looked at differences in foot position and gastrocnemius growth and things like that. So it can happen. And so that's why we've started to incorporate that a little bit more into our routines as well. Whether that's superior to just one single position, I think it would depend on your training status, your training age, and how much exposure you've been doing over time. But that means we've got a slight different leg day to what we've been used to. It's going to be a slightly different format. And I mentioned in yesterday's video, I think it was yesterday's video, these videos kind of all blur into one, but that thought process around whether you should do leg extensions first or whether you should do your squat pattern first. And so for me, I personally like to do the squat pattern first, because I don't think that pre-exhausting in the leg extension is the way forward in terms of, I think that it has more of an impact on your ability to then squat than if you squatted, it would have less ability on your, or impact on your ability to hit the leg extension. So from my own kind of case study and stuff that I've worked with in the past in terms of clients, I've seen that they're able to maintain those intensities that you would have programmed on the leg extension if they squatted first, but not vice versa. And that's kind of now supported a little bit with a new research study that looked at the pre-exhaust method and actually showed that if you did extensions before your compound exercise, your free weight squat, actually it might have negative consequences. And I think there's probably a bit of an individual response to it, because there is some suggestion that pre-exhaust works. But for me, I'm one of those non-responders in that sense, so that's why I always keep it that way in my format. Now, again, somebody might be like, oh, well, why wouldn't you just do the leg extensions? That's all you can eat for the quads, because you're getting the rec fem in there. And I want to make a quick statement about that, because people talk about doing the leg extensions for the rec fem, and the citation, in a sense, is because during a dynamic squat, the relative length change of the rec femoris, because you're going into knee flexion and hip flexion at the same time, the change in rec femoris stays constant in a sense. So it's kind of a bit more isometric, quasi-isometric in the lowering phase and things like that. So basically because of that, it's not getting exposed to the same demands as what the other three quad musculature is. So in terms of that, the argument is that leg extension, you're exposing that rectus femoris because it's fixed joint angle, it's moving about one singular axis of rotation. So great. The problem is people are sitting too far forward, and so they're in a greater hip flex position. So if we want that rec fem in a longer muscle limb, then we need that seat back and we need to be in a more hip extended position. And so that's where I feel like we're kind of making this broad statement around, well, it's better for quad growth, but honestly I don't think it is if you shorten that position in hip flexion. I think it is when you make it longer and go into hip extension. So that's where not all leg extensions are the same, and that's probably why if we compare the leg extension to a free squat exercise, that actually the muscle development wouldn't be that substantial unless the leg extension is done correctly. So that's my little rant about leg extensions being superior. Yes, I think they are, and yes, you could do them at the start of your session, and yes, if you don't like squatting, you don't think that's good for your quad development, then go ahead and do it. And you'll see people also posting videos where it's like, well, all I do is squat and look at the size of my quads. What they normally have is an underdeveloped rec fem, and quite honestly, I think I'm kind of one of those people, or I was one of those people back in the day. But luckily for me, played a lot of soccer, so that rec fem gets quite a bit of development too. So with that in mind, we will see you in the gym. If you've made it this far, make sure you watch the full video. At the end, make sure you like it, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe, because this channel is growing. I wish I started it sooner, but here we are. So make sure you follow along, because I love that we're creating a bit of a community here. So we'll see you in the gym for our leg day. We made it to the gym, which means we're starting off with the abductions today, and so getting that glute medius fired up. No fancy warm-ups or anything, no different exercises. We're just going to go straight into this, use feeder sets. So I like to typically do my feeder sets where it's just like a couple of clusters, so 3 to 5 repetitions, short pause, kind of almost like a cluster set, 30-second rest maximal, and then we go up our weight. And then today we're going higher intensity, lower reps for this exercise. So nothing too crazy, kind of 30-pound-ish jumps. Again, leaving plenty of reps in the tank with a cluster format, so we shouldn't be getting close to proximity to failure until we're at our working set. I did say 2 feeder sets, but sometimes it's 2, 3, 4, depending on how big of a jump I want to do. I actually started pretty light, and what I'm going to do is vary the hip position as well. So we just use the rest time, change the weight, catch our breath, make sure we're not in a state of fatigue, because again, the whole point of feeder sets is that you're supposed to just be warming up for your main primary set and not necessarily be fatiguing and pushing yourself to failure on every single set. Now, that method could also work. People will argue it, calcium ion fatigue, higher volume, not being that great of a response. My thing is, depending on where you've been, depends on how much volume you can tolerate. So that repeated bout effect, if I took this cluster warm up and then next time I do 6 reps, next time I do 7 reps, you see the story. Eventually I'm going to build up and accumulate volume, but my body's response to it should adapt over time. And then that's kind of where I think the progressive overload, that concept comes in, is that it's an accumulation of volume load over time. And so the muscle should grow, should get stronger, so then you can do more, basically. Alright,
go one more feeder set here, and then we'll get into our working sets for the day. So, as you see, this was in the previous episodes of my leg days. This was the last exercise that I would typically do, whereas today we're putting it in as the primary exercise. So sometimes I like to switch that up just to get a little bit of different exposure, especially on areas that maybe don't get as much love during the session sometimes. So with the glute medius particularly, only this is my really focused glute medius exercise. So again, do some extra sets that expose it to a little bit of intensity from now and then. Now, is that the main focal point of what I need to get from a bodybuilding standpoint? Most likely not, but again, there's nothing wrong with having some decently developed glutes, especially once you're on stage. I wouldn't know yet, but from what I've seen, like those that do have some decent glutes actually look good. Alright, so actually, in that position, that might be working weight for the day. Now, with us leaning back, probably be able to squeeze out 5 to 6, and so that's kind of the rep range that we're trying to aim for in terms of today's session. And then, once we've done this, we'll flick over to the adductions, so we'll get kind of our adductors involved in there. And I saw an article the other day, I'd have to go and find this again, but that basically was saying about how hip adductor and the adductor magnus is an underthought about muscle, yet coming from the S&C background, working in pro sports, that muscle is generally a target that we hit quite often because of injuries to the area within things like soccer and within things like basketball because of the change of direction component. So it's kind of interesting to see that people don't think about that muscle and its importance, yet in other environments, like the environment that I've been exposed to mostly, it is definitely something that people should target and train. So it's interesting to see that conceptually. Oh yeah. All right, so we're actually going to respect the rest on this one, so I can do a little bit more rambling on this. And I'm actually feeling today's gym fit. I don't normally wear sweats to the gym, but I feel like a lot of influencers do, so maybe I'm following suit on that. But I'm actually feeling the fit today. I actually like what I've got going on, so I'll probably use this fit a few more times throughout this series of prep videos. But let's not forget as well, when I said about targeting the glute med, there are other exercises that we can do, and there is an interesting study that's out there that compared some different glute and quad activation across different exercises, and actually the side plank had some decent voluntary contractions of the glute medius. Obviously you've got to brace and hold an isometric in that position. If you collapse, glute medius is lengthening, so it's losing leverage in a sense. And so basically we could do that, right? But the thing is a side plank going to get us that same amount of muscle growth as an external loaded machine like this? Probably not. So what I would need there is I would need the ability to kind of load it up, and that's hard. But there are things that we can do, like getting an eccentric or an isotonic kind of contraction in that side bend, side plank position. We can use chains, we can use plates to kind of get some extra external load. So there are options out there. It's just a bit more of a finicky setup. So when that's the case, let's go to our defaults, let's go to the things that give us stability, and that's where these machines, I think, are undefeated in that aspect. And then the cool thing is, we can again change our relative hip flexion position. So that's also going to manipulate how much stretch the glutes have. So I'm not going to sit there and go, okay, the stretch is the only thing that we need, but it is a thing that we should be putting into our training, especially as certain muscles definitely respond better to stretch than others. And I think the glutes, because a lot of the training of the glutes is generally kind of in that hip thrust type position, which is more of a shortened position, I think that exposing the glutes to longer length tension exercise is also pretty important. So that's where mixing it up. Again, I normally will throw some of that stuff in PM sessions. It doesn't necessarily form my main primary section for the day. So all right, done with here, we'll go to adduction. So similar thought process here, except for because we already hit abductors, we do have a slight bit more muscle temperature. So that's where we'll hit just 2 feeder sets for this one, and then we'll get into our 2 working sets. This machine feels like it's broke. It kind of was working. I'm not too sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. We'll try and put the weight back up. This was out of order last week, so just want to make sure everything's functioning properly. If not, we'll have to go back to the drawing board and hit slight different exercise for adductors. But that was kind of a weird one, if I'm being honest. Like the resistance profile, I kept clicking there, if you saw. So we'll figure it out. Let's see how it goes. Yeah, the resistance profile on this machine is cooked. And it's not that I've put on a crazy amount of weight either, but it's definitely got like a sticking point on the machine. So that's fun. Although we're still getting some effective range in, so we'll hit one more set. But yeah, that was a bit of a weird one. Doesn't feel exactly how you would want it to be. So as we take a little bit of rest, just fill out the program. And that's where I feel like a lot of people go wrong, is they don't track their workouts. So they're kind of just coming into the gym, hitting stuff kind of a bit willy-nilly, and they're not progressing over time. They kind of forget, well, all right, today 205 felt fine. Next week, go and do 200 because I can't remember if I did 205 last time. And as you get a little older, your memory gets a little less effective in that case. So it's always good to just have something where you can track, which if you want to track your workouts by me, I do have an app where you can go to ctsportscience.com and you can check it out and get an online training program. And you can actually get a copy of this training program for $1. So there's a little plug there. So we'll hit one more set here and then get off this machine because it definitely needs servicing and I'm not trying to get hurt. That's good. All right, so we actually now go into another underdeveloped area, which is calves. Should we only do the top portion, or should we only do the bottom portion, or should we do full range of motion? And then the answer is we probably should do all three. So full range of motion might be the ticket, but there is some suggestion that the bottom position is a little bit more stimulating, that lengthened position. So today's session, we are going to stay a little bit more in the bottom position. Focus there. And what we're doing is going to almost fatigue. Now, there is evidence to suggest if you take your partials beyond failure, and actually that kind of minimal range of motion having a stimulating effect on muscle growth. And the reason for that is when the ankle is maximally dorsiflexed, like in a calf raise with a deficit, that is the position in which isometrically we can produce the highest force output. So in terms of that maximal ankle dorsiflexion, the maximal force we can do as a plantar flexion moment is the highest. And that's why even with very minimal perturbation, kind of these isotonic slash isometric quasi type contractions, that's why you're going to see muscle growth with that type of training. So basically you need that bottom position when you're training the calf, and also I think when you're training the tendon as well, because we spend a lot of time in that short and contracted position for tendon isometrics and very little time in that bottom position. And so this is a great way to stimulate both of those adaptations simultaneously. The only problem I have with the lifting shoes is that they don't have the greatest grip in terms of on this slant board, so that's where barefoot or a better sneaker probably works, but I can't be bothered changing my shoes just for one exercise. So just a couple of sets there. We're going to go into our squat stuff. So based on kind of what we talked about in the car, decided to show you what I mean by pre-exhausting in terms of before doing your compound exercise. So what we're going to do is this week we'll hit the leg extension first, then we'll go in the pendulum squat and see how many reps to failure we can get at a set load, and then next week I'll do it the opposite way around and we'll compare, and then the week after we'll go back to this format, so then we can basically account for if it's a repeated bout effect, some adaptations, and so we'll do kind of a bit of a counterbalance crossover design there. Now obviously it's within one individual, so I'm the N of one, but I'll physically push myself to as many reps as possible in both cases and keep the leg extension and loads the same in both scenarios. So you guys should try that also at home, because some people will respond positively and I think some people will respond negatively, and I'm in the camp where I think I'm a negative responder. So let me just check the rep ranges on this. Alright, so we got single leg, which also, that's a slight bit harder than our double leg pattern. And then I also mentioned in the car, we want to get this seat back a little bit So to get that rec fem and the activation pattern of that rec fem in a more lengthened position, we want to be sat back. Wow, that felt really hard today. All right, so we want to be 8 to 12 range. In my head, counting about 9. So some of those days, back end of the week, probably going to be on the lower rep range of that. Earlier in the week, probably going to be on the higher rep range. But the one thing I will say is my quads feel tasty today, that's for sure. And so that could also be related to the recovery timeline. A little bit less recovery. We normally would do leg day tomorrow instead of today. But I'm actually allowing the back to get more of a full day recovery instead. So that's the thought process behind that. And then we got another minute-ish rest here. Again, hopefully that first set kind of acts as a bit of a potentiator for that second set. So we want to at least rep match here if we can. And you notice I'm not really doing too much in terms of the time under tension with the eccentric, just a bit of a controlled one. Not that I'm not saying the eccentric's not important, but in terms of this today, I just want to get a concentric output nice and controlled with the eccentric. It's not necessarily looking to do some eccentric overload where 2 up, 1 down, which we've done in the past, things like that. So we'll check in on the rest. The other thing that I find is like sometimes with these rest periods, they always feel that little bit too long, but at the same time, psychologically versus physiologically, sometimes your mind thinks that you can go again, but the body isn't ready. So that's why I like to respect the rest, especially with single leg work, because we're getting a little bit more isolated force because we haven't got the bilateral force deficit. So shit, that feels fucking good. All right, get that breath back between sighs. Fucking hey. Oh, heart rate got up into zone 2. That's always a good sign. All right. Just 2 sets here. We'll give the bench a little wipe down, and then we'll go and do our pendulum squats and see what we can get. Standardizing the pendulum squat, so we got 2 plates and a quarter, and then we're going to do as many reps as possible to failure. And I'm also standardizing the rest time, so we're taking 3 minutes between doing those leg extensions and then hitting the pendulum squat. So then that next time we come and do this next week, we'll do the same thing where we'll take 3 minutes before hitting it again. And so we're gonna rep to failure here. So that's the main objective. And if I'm being honest, right now, my quads feel very warm, but also I feel like there is that little bit of residual fatigue. So we're gonna hit this first. Now, the thing is, having this exercise as the first thing that we do next week, we've either got to do a bit of a feeder set to get to the warm-up weight, or I'll just hit it kind of more fresh and raw after the other 2 warm-ups. So I'm gonna think about that. But 2 plates and a quarter, I should have the ability to just do that even, sort of cold. Although it does feel kind of heavy. Ooh, come on. All right. Okay. Oh, I think that was 10. I think. All right, so the experiment's going to be whether next time we do that, we'll get more than 10 before the pre-exhaust. I don't even know if I can get back in there. Oh. All right, we do technically have one more set here, so I'm going to reduce the weight down slightly and then basically hit one more set. We're at that point where it's all a psychological battle from here in terms of leg day, because I now feel kind of fatigued, but gotta push through. Could I have pushed a couple more? Probably. But honestly, like I said, mental battle from there. And we do have other exercises. So, catch our breath, clean up this machine, move into the next exercise. Hamstring curl time. And the difference that we have here compared to the leg extension is we want the seat a little further forward, so then we can actually hip flex a little bit more. And so then that way we get a better stretch. And one thing I'm going to do is 2 down, 1 up to get that eccentric overload that we talked about. Alright, we'll rest, do one more set. The weight was kind of okay, so we'll just put a little nugget on. And so the thought process with the 2 down, 1 up is that eccentric overload. So we're controlling that eccentric against gravity with the one leg. So that makes the eccentric contraction a little more forceful, a little harder to do, and a great one for hamstrings. Heart rate is kind of high, so I am going to let that come down a little before we start this next set. So probably get a quick drink, reset. So a question might be, why would you do the 2 down, 1 up besides the kind of eccentric overload? And the other side of it is, we know that the eccentric muscle action is a little bit more damaging. So in terms of the overload that we get there, if we consider the repeated bout effect of basically improving the response over time, so the actual fatigue response and the amount of muscle damage that comes with that response, then basically when we do this again, or we do something that is slightly different, like just a single leg hamstring curl, we're going to get less fatigue and less muscle damage, so less soreness, which means then we should progress quicker within our next exercise and stuff like that. And that's another reason why progressive overload occurs, is because our muscle will adapt not only to the force requirements, to being able to produce more force, but also to the damage requirements as well. So it'll get less susceptible to muscle damage. So, second set. Come on. Alright, next exercise in the block. So next up we have leg press. Unfortunately, the machines that I wanted to use are being used right now. And this doesn't have a pin, which is not good. Let's see, can we steal this pin? Yes, we can. Alright, so I haven't used this machine much if ever. There's always one. Alright, so gonna make this a little bit more glute focused. Not an ideal machine to be in, but doesn't seem like the seat wants to adjust, so it is what it is. Alright, not ideal. So we're just gonna skip this, I think, and then we'll go into our last little bit of accessory work. And we've done this one before, so it needs no explanation. But slightly different axis of rotation now to make this a lot more glute focused. So we didn't get our leg press in just as quite we liked, so that's where we get some hamstring back extension, a little bit more glute focused back extension there. Catch your breath, one more set. Alright, I think we'll have one little last look at the leg press and then we just might call it a day here.
Alright, leg day done. Which, honestly, I've never done a leg day before where every single one of the 3 leg press machines are taken at the same time. People must be getting that Saturday press session in just like me, and they want to wait around for it, so it's okay. Not the end of the world. And we did do our little start of our internal case study, individual case study with the pendulum squat. So next week we'll wear the same fit, the same clothes, everything, and we will then do the pendulum squat again, but before doing the leg extension to failure. And then what we'll do is the leg extension to failure after pendulum squat at the same weight. So we'll see if we get more reps or the same reps in either condition. So I truly pushed to failure. I didn't leave any reps in reserve. You can see it in the video. And I always train, especially those movements, with intensity. So I'm not going to cheat this case study, but if you think that I am, try it out yourself. Again, there is individual variation. I think some people will respond the way that I respond, and I think there'll be some people who respond opposite. And that's the beauty of exercise science and physiology. No 2 people are exactly the same, which is fun. So hopefully you enjoyed today's lift. I definitely didn't, just kidding. But today's lift, always a good session. Start the weekend off right, get your legs done. That way you can forget about them for the rest of the weekend and enjoy. So hopefully you guys enjoy your weekend. If you did tune into this video, tune in tomorrow because we do have back day. Should be nice and fresh for back day. We didn't put any hinge patterns in, we didn't put any pull patterns in today. So our grip should be good, our back should be good. We did have that little bit of back extension glute ham raise, or should I say glute ham raise. Technically it wasn't a back extension, but we did it more glute focused, so we took the lower back out of it primarily. There's some contribution there. I keep going in rhetorics here, but make sure you tune in tomorrow as well. Make sure you're following along this journey. Like I've said before, make sure you subscribe. If you're interested in more things, check out my website. That's where my main blog is. And make sure you follow me on the socials as well, at CT Sports Science, because I do post other content on various different platforms. And so we will see you tomorrow for the back day video.